religion's very good, but I didn't really need it because I was doing very well.
Yeah.
And I certainly didn't need Jesus. Why would I want Jesus as a Jew? Would I want a third eye? You know, I don't need this, right?
So Jeff, you became a dentist and then a forensic dentist. Tell me how hard it is to hide a body.
It's very difficult. I've done several cases where bodies were attempted to be eliminated where nobody would be able to identify. These were done by professional murderers who said, they'll never identify your husband, don't worry, he's gone. And we identify him because it's very, very difficult. You could bury him, you could cut him up in pieces, you could drop him in the East River or the Hudson River. As you know, Manhattan is an island, and that's where I served most of my time as the chief forensic dentist here. And so people are dropping bodies in the rivers around here.
You have a story about that?
Yeah, a woman was murdered, and found out afterwards it was murdered by her husband, who was a private pilot. And he murdered his wife, put her in a 50-gallon drum, took his plane out to the ocean as far as it could go, and still safely returned, dropped the barrel with his wife's body in there in the ocean, figuring that he was weighted, so he's never going to see her. Nobody's going to ever find her. She's going to sink to the bottom, and that's going to be the end of it. Fortunately for us, it doesn't work that way. Body decomposes because of the bacteria, and you get gases. Gases are produced with such pressure that it can lift all that weight that he put in there. It was not enough to prevent it from rising. And as it rose, it hit thermal planes or streams in the ocean, which then brought it up into the area of Manhattan. The police see it, they bring it in, brought it over to the medical examiner's office, and I made the identification.
Okay, so she's at the bottom of the ocean, rises not from the dead, but she rises up. Now, as a Jewish man, growing up in New York, how do you come to put your faith in Jesus, who lived, taught, died, rose from the dead? And how do you put your mind around that as a forensic dentist?
I have to go back and give you a little history. I was born and raised in the Bronx. We lived here in the Village for several years, but then we moved up to the Bronx, but we still had a store on Waverly Place. We're looking at Waverly Place there.
Yeah, and your family is Jewish?
Yes, my family's raised
from
all
where?
Jewish. From Odessa and Kiev.
Ukraine.
Right, Ukraine basically. Okay. Both sides, 100% Jew. And
even the DNA says so.
Yeah, that's right.
If we're talking forensics.
Yes, I did my DNA, and my DNA says you're 100%.
Yeah.
So I'm very proud of that, because most of my friends who've done DNA, they say, well, they're 70% this, they're 20% that.
Right.
They got all and I'm 100%. So as I would say to them, if we were dogs, I get my papers. I go into the kennel club. You can't. You're a mutt. I'm a purebred.
Oh, purebred.
I'm just saying.
Yeah. Just saying.
Just saying. Okay, so born in the Bronx.
Yeah.
And I knew we didn't speak of Christians in those days. We spoke of Catholics.
Right.
There were Jews and Catholics.
Yep.
I played ball on teams, and my teammates were either Jewish, Irish, or Italian. Those are the people there.
Yeah.
I thought if you were not Jewish, you were Catholic. I didn't know anything about Protestants.
Was your family religious?
We weren't religious. Well, we observed the holidays, the major holidays, certainly Passover,
Same with us.
Yom Kippur, etc. But we didn't keep a kosher home. My grandparents kept a kosher home, but not my parents, and certainly not me. But we knew we were only one thing: we were Jewish. That's it, you know. And there was no reason to want to associate with the religion of my friends. I mean, I would eat in their home. I played ball with them, but they went to church, and I went to a temple. I mean, synagogue. Yeah, that's what we did.
Okay.
Fast forward to becoming an adult. I went through school here. I went through City College, NYU Dental School, trained at Bellevue and NYU as an oral surgeon. And at the same time as I went to oral surgery training, I associated with the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. That's where I learned to be a forensic dentist.
Yeah.
And I did that for over 30 years.
Well, this is really important, because a lot of people will say that Jews find Jesus because they're uneducated and they just have this spiritual longing. They hit the bottom, and some nice Christian came up to them and shared with them the gospel. But it wasn't like that for you. You're a very intellectual man, a very successful man, and yet you wanted to find Jesus and the truth about the gospel intellectually.
Yes, Exactly. It was just the opposite.
Right.
I didn't need anything. I was very well. I was doing very well in my practice.
Yeah.
I was practicing, I was in Madison Avenue and 57th
Life
Street.
was good.
Very pretty nice, prestigious area.
Yeah.
A big co-op on the Upper West Side. I mean, religion's very good, but I didn't really need it because I was doing very well.
Yeah.
And I certainly didn't need Jesus. Why would I want Jesus? I mean, as a Jew, would I want a third eye? You know,
Totally.
don't need this.
Right.
Okay, but at that time, I met from my office a wonderful, beautiful little young woman come in who became my wife. That's how we met.
Yeah.
My dental chair. And I proposed to her and she accepted. And she said, I'd like a religious service. Now, this is pretty strange because she was brought up as a Catholic till around 11. And then there was this dispute with some priest and they said, well, you don't have to go back to church. So
Okay.
so she stopped going
So they
to
left
church.
the Catholic Church at that point.
Yeah, right. So she wants a religious service. So who's going to do this? I mean, I was basically an agnostic Jew.
Right.
I had not gone to temple since I was bar mitzvah or to somebody else's bar mitzvah. That was the last time I was really in a temple or a synagogue. Who was going to marry us? So we lived in the Upper West Side. We went to every church that was in the Upper West Side. And of course, they look at us as if we had two heads and say, well, wait, you're not Lutheran and you're not Lutheran. What are you doing here? Oh, we want to get married by a priest. Well, that's nice.
Yeah, go to Vegas.
Yeah, but you can't do it. Yeah,
That'll
go
work.
to some other place. We're not going to do it. Until a childhood friend of Susan, who was a wonderful guy, who also lived in the Upper West Side. This is like the late 70s, early 80s. And he said, I go to a church that has a woman who's the senior rector, an Episcopal church.
Yeah.
There's a woman. And I didn't know women were allowed to be. So she was one of the first ones ordained in the United States as a priest, as a rector. And he said, and the associate rector is a man called Steve Pogoloff. And I said, Steve Pogoloff, that doesn't sound like an Episcopalian sounding name.
Yeah.
It sounds like one of my tribe, huh?
Yeah.
And he certainly was. He was a Jewish believer who went to seminary and became a priest. So my wife, she was really glad to see a woman as the rector, and I was glad to see the associate rector as a Jew because he
Jewish
can
guy.
understand me. He understands. If I talk to him about food, he's not going to say bagel what.
Right.
He'll know. Okay. So we started going, and they married us. And after we got married, my wife wanted to get baptized in the Episcopal Church, so she was baptized.
Okay.
And I would sit under this senior rector, Carol Anderson, who was a wonderful proponent of the gospel. She really didn't miss words. She told us there's sin, you are sinners, and the answer to that is Jesus, and that's the way it is.
Well, how'd you feel about that, being a Jewish guy hearing that you're a sinner?
Well, I knew this guy was bad, and the guy over there was bad, but
Yeah.
not me. I mean,
Right.
You're not talking to me.
Well, I didn't dump the body in the
Yeah,
ocean.
that's right.
Yeah.
I'm a good guy. I'm a good guy. So Carol seemed to have contacts all over the place. One time we had Desmond Tutu, from South Africa come. We had celebrity. I don't know how she did it, but she had real connections, and was wonderful for us because I got exposed to all these wonderful theologians and people.
Yeah.
But again, I'm not looking for Jesus. I'm there as an intellectual Jew to listen. Yeah, tell me about your ideas. I think that's good. She brought this guy in named Bob Mendelson. At that time, he was here in New York. He was at the Manhattan Station for Jews for Jesus, and he was giving a series at our church in the evening on the Jewish perspectives of Christianity. And Susan said, "Why don't you go?" I said, "Sure." And I took my best friend, who was also Jewish. Stan was there, and we had another person who was Jewish. So I wanted to come on because I'm going into the den of Gentiles. So I want to. I don't know about this.
Yeah,
guy
being led in
Mendelson.
by Jews.
Yeah. So Mendelson. So I want to make sure we got guys backing me up and say, no, we don't do that. You can say, yeah, tell them, Stan, we don't do that. What is he talking about?
Right.
And so Bob gave the gospel, and when they had the question answer period, I raised my hand and I said, wait a second, Bob, you mean to tell me that if I don't believe in Jesus, because I feel I'm a pretty good guy, I don't even cheat on my income tax, and I can say that with a straight face, and really, people say you're a really nice guy. I'm not going to go to heaven unless through Jesus? Is that what you're telling me? He says, I anticipated him saying, well, everybody else, but you, Jeff, you don't have to, because you're Jeff, and don't worry, you're going to probably get a pass. But everybody else, no, he didn't say that. He said, yeah, right, you're not going to heaven. When I was shocked, he was my own landsman telling me, no, you're supposed to say, oh, yes, you can do it. No. Right. I said, so now I'm getting a little upset, and I want to find out, why does this guy believe this? You know, and he gave us his testimony. It's very interesting. And I started reading the Gospels, and at the same time, going to the church with my wife. Again, I was hearing the word. And as it says in the Bible, as you know, and some people know, don't know, that faith comes through hearing the word, through listening. And that's what I was doing. And not that I intentionally wanted to seek him or have Jesus as my Messiah. I was just hearing this stuff. And everything seems to start having a ring of truthfulness. Okay, it wasn't just the story. Yeah. Before I believed, I said, well, that's a nice story. You know, somebody wrote it up. I mean, all religions and all peoples have their history of how something happened, how something started, and they're usually good stories. But this was very intriguing. Being a forensic dentist, after reading the Gospels, I said, this is very, very true. This is how eyewitness testimony is given. Yeah. Because I've sat in trials, and I've sat next to eyewitnesses when we would be interviewed by the DA, I as an expert witness, but they as a fact witness or as a eyewitness. And I could see that one person gave who had witnessed the same event, almost a completely different story. Right. So how come you didn't mention what he mentioned? And he mentioned something that you mentioned and didn't mention. That's the way eyewitness testimony is. So when people would criticize, and me being myself at that time, the gospel, say, well, how come Mark said this, but Matthew didn't have it? He forgot that. Why didn't he put that in? Of course, that's not the way things go. People tell the story as they see it and as they remember it. And that's why it seemed very, very true. Okay, so that was really pushing me to say, hey, there may be something that's really true here. This is not just a story, this New Testament. I know the Old Testament may be true, but not the New Testament. And that was men. We know it was all men. They were all these apostle people. I don't know what they're talking about. And then Reverend Anderson gave a sermon on the resurrection and the fact that probably around Easter, and that the body is not found. You could find any body. You can't get rid of a body. So in biblical times, it's almost, I would say, impossible to get rid of a body. It's almost impossible, as I said today, to get rid of a body. Yeah. Many, many times we had cases where we had a body that was really chopped up by some gang and then put in little sandwich bags and distributed all over the city that it would never be identified. But he was identified because you can't just destroy it, okay? It's very hard to destroy completely a human body. Okay. So certainly biblical times, if that body was around after Jesus was killed on the cross, that body would have been found. Would have been found by somebody. Well, it might have been found 10 years later, but it would have been found.
Everybody was looking for him.
Everybody's looking for him. There's a lot of people want to do it. Yeah. It wasn't found. And that also rings very true. Yeah. Okay. Because without a body, then you have to believe that the resurrection is true. Yeah. Now you have a real dilemma. Because if I believe that, which I was believing now, then I have to believe everything else he said was true. Because why would he lie about everything but not lie about the resurrection? Okay. Yeah. So once I believed that the resurrection was true, then the whole Testament is true. The whole New Testament, everything he said is true. Wow. Like it or not, that's the story. That's the game. You either want to be saved and be a Christian, or you want to just keep believing your own belief. And the problem is, this day, people have their own worldview, as they say. Okay, and sometimes they even say their own facts. Okay, I always thought facts were one fact. That you can't have one fact and I have a different fact about the same thing. Right. But that's the way it is these days, and people don't like to hear facts that violate their beliefs. Right. And that's a big problem. That's a big problem for a lot of people. That's why I feel it's a stumbling block for a lot of people.
It is a huge stumbling block, but intellectually, you arrive at the conclusion that it's logical to believe that Jesus lived, died, and rose from the grave.
Not only logical, you would need more of a leap of faith not to believe the Gospels, not to believe that he was resurrected. Wow. Because if you say he wasn't resurrected, that means there was a body. And I would say, why did they find the body? why didn't they find the body? Well, they couldn't find the body because it wasn't there.
Wow.
Because everybody, the Romans would have liked, the Sanhedrin would have liked, so many people would have liked to say, oh, here's your savior. You know, we found her, okay?
Right.
And, you know, very easily identified. You know, he has the wounds that were consistent. That's what we do also in forensic. You want to see when someone's murdered, you look at the wounds. Is it consistent with the homicide? Was he actually killed by these wounds? Or did he die a natural death and someone shot him to make it look like it was a homicide?
Right.
We had cases like that. So you have to investigate. But my experience as a forensic dentist over 30, 40 years bring me to the one conclusion that everything that's spoken of in the New Testament is true. Is true. There is no made up story as I used to believe.
So you would encourage our Jewish people to open up not only the Old Testament, but the New Testament.
Right.
And search for themselves.
Yeah. Look at it. See if it doesn't ring true when you read it.
Right.
Okay.
Right. That's a good point. So how did this change you as a human being?
Well,
because it was first an intellectual understanding.
Right.
And then it became spiritual.
Then it became spiritual, yes. And now I wanted to be part of this. So I became baptized.
Yeah.
It says that when you are baptized or when you become a believer, you're a new creation. That's what it says in the Bible. That's what I believe. And because of that, I did change. I used to curse a lot. Not all the time, but
me too.
Cursed a lot more than I do right now. I don't think my daughters, who are 34 years old, ever heard me curse. Okay? Ever.
Yeah.
But before we got married, they would have heard me curse. Before I became a Christian, they would have heard that.
Yeah.
And also, going along with that, I also am very quick to anger. I get very angry very quickly.
Yeah.
It takes a lot to get me angry.
Wow.
You really have to work at it. And I didn't do that intentionally.
Right. These aren't changes that you said, I'm going to convince myself, I'm going to change my own mind and my own habits, and I'm going to create new behaviors because it's a good thing to do. This happened, it came over you.
Yeah, it just changed.
Which is what the Bible talks about, the Spirit of
That's
God
right.
living in the human being, basically cleaning house. And I like to say that the Spirit of God doesn't like to live in a dirty home.
I agree.
Kicks all the junk out.
That's right.
Sometimes it's immediate, sometimes it's over years.
No, this was like immediate.
Yeah, wow.
I didn't realize it till someone says, you don't curse anymore.
Yeah, the most brilliant people in the world cannot overcome their own habits and animal instincts.
Of course not.
You know, it's so difficult to do. And like myself, 20 years I was trying to change my own behavior and change my own thoughts because I thought it was the right thing to do. I want to become a better person. Couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. Till one day I just said, all right, give up.
Well,
I give up. And then Jesus shows up, does it for me. I knew it was a miracle. And then I went to go intellectually find him.
right.
And I did.
Right.
The more I study my faith now, the deeper my faith becomes.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah,
Agree.
yeah.
I mean, and people would assume in the beginning when I first became a Christian, that was because of my wife, because she was,
of course.
She became a Christian early on. She got rebaptized and she was very biblically oriented. She would read the Bible. Later in life, she became the assistant teaching director at Community Bible Study, where we live in New Jersey. And she just recently retired after 30 years of service there. She was an example of what a Christian is.
Wow.
But I didn't do it because Susan asked me to.
Yeah.
She didn't say, wouldn't it be nice?
But that flies in the face of being born again. A human being can't say, yeah, I'm going to become a Christian because others are doing it. Every person that becomes a real Christian has to have an encounter with the living God that changes them intellectually, spiritually, changes their heart in some way where they recognize Jesus. It's not, this is something cool to do. I'm a Christian. No, it doesn't work that way. And I think that's an illusion that a lot of people have in the world, that Christians are kind of raised Christian, they're born Christian. It's a group of people that just call themselves a certain label and they believe a certain thing. No, every Christian that's a true Christian has to have an encounter with the living God. Your wife had that, you had that. My wife and I had that on the same day, or we came to faith in Jesus.
Wow.
We came to faith in Jesus on the same night. And I think it's really smart that we can share Jesus with the world on an intellectual level, because a lot of people, they go through life based on their feelings. And I didn't want Jesus to be just a feeling for me. I wanted to love God with my mind. And people like you, very well educated, very successful, their life is together, understand Jesus with their mind, come to faith in him, and then have their spiritual transformation.
That's true. Working in the Emmy's office for many years, I saw the personification of evil. What one human being did to another, I knew in my heart and intellectually there was some other force that was directing him to do that. That one person could not do things that I saw to another human being.
Yeah.
Okay? I knew there was this evil force. As a matter of fact, sometimes we would even feel it as I would go down into the mortuary division where all the bodies were, where they were being autopsied or they were being put back into the refrigeration unit. Thinking about it now, there was the feeling of evil that was right there.
Pure evil.
And if you believe that, which I did believe that there's evil, then you have to believe the corollary that there's good. And that also was another influence, back in my mind. All these things, put together, it's like you get the eureka, like, hey, this is true.
Yeah.
This is not made up stuff.
And in a day and age where everybody thinks that they can make up their own truth because it steers them away from what's really actually true and reality. If you were to be standing in front of a Jewish person and they say, hey, I don't know about your religion, man. I don't know about your faith, but I'm kind of curious. What would you tell that person?
I would say, read the New Testament. Also, you should know your Old Testament.
Yeah.
You should know all the prophecies in the Old Testament of the coming of the Messiah, Mashiach. And that Mashiach is fit only one person in all of history. All the different foretelling of the coming, where he would come, how he would come, what he would do. It's all in the Old Testament. It's in my Bible, right? The Jewish Bible. It's all there. It's only fit by one person in all of history. There is no coincidence. That's beyond mathematical numbers. It would be so high a number, nobody can even talk about the number.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. Know your history, that everything that Jesus was fulfilled from the Old Testament, and that everything he said in the New Testament is being fulfilled and has been fulfilled and will be fulfilled.
Amazing.
Because he said it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Jeff, great name.
I like the name too.
Thank you, brother. Thank you so much for sharing your testimony. It was encouraging to me, and I hope it was encouraging to you too. If you like this kind of content, give a thumbs up to the video. If you want to get in contact with us, with me, with Jeff, you can find our email down in the description. Stay tuned for more exciting testimonies just like this coming up on So Be It. God bless you all. Thanks, Jeff.
Oh, you're welcome.